Welcome to another episode of the Nonfiction Nation podcast. My name is Hunter.
And I am Rico.
And today's episode talks about parenting.
Yes. So, for the record, neither of us are experts, doctors, scientists, whatever you want to call it. So, this is purely, largely based on my own experience as a parent and raising my son, who is
Not a parent.
not a parent yet. But, you know, I think that I've done a pretty good job, and I've learned a lot kind of along the way. So, this is sort of aimed at people that are single parents. And while that is predominantly women these days, there's a lot of single mothers out there. I was a single father, and I raised my son almost exclusively by myself. I did have some help from his mother. We had, up to a certain point, we had shared custody, but the majority of the time he was with me. And so, yeah, I did most of the heavy lifting. So, the reason why I kind of wanted to talk about this is because this is such a prevalent thing, because there are so many single parents out there. And I think that a lot of times they're doing all of the parenting without any real guidance or maybe a better,
Like a reference point, maybe?
or even just like a better example of how they should be parenting in the first place, because the way that we were taught or raised as people doesn't always necessarily equate to the best way to teach somebody else, right? And there's a lot of things that sort of get lost in translation. There's again, the way that your parents treated you or raised you or spent time with you or lack thereof. All of those things are pretty big factors. And if you just kind of follow along with the same blueprint that you were given, that isn't always the best way to go about it. So again, this is just my attempt to give a little bit of guidance in the things that I believe are important. And
To share your experience.
right. And
As somebody who's been there and done that.
right. So, and it's kind of a funny thought that I've had, and I've said this for years now, that I honestly believe that 80% of the world's problems are based on bad parenting. It just, like I was saying a minute ago, there are so many people that just kind of follow in the same footsteps of what was or the experience that they had, and thinking that that's how they should parent, or they just never really take the time to think about doing it a little differently, maybe. So, there are a lot of things that I think are really important, but one of the biggest ones is that you have to let kids be kids, meaning that sometimes you'll go to like a social situation and you'll see somebody who has kids and the kids are acting up a little bit. And I don't mean throwing themselves on the ground, screaming, kicking, or crying unnecessarily. Those things to me, I don't think those are necessary, right? But kids want to explore. They want to play. They want to roughhouse. They want to do the things that they do, especially little boys. And I had to say that again for my own experience of raising my son. And I also had, I have 3 nephews. And it was really kind of fortunate because the boys were all spaced almost exactly a year apart, right? So even though my nephews weren't always around when they were, it did kind of help kind of foster that environment of this group of boys playing and roughhousing together. And I speak to the roughhousing as an important thing, because it does a lot for kind of like their socialization and learning their limitations, learning what they can do, and understanding that it's okay to do that, to test themselves and to struggle and to have contest, and even to the extent of like pushing the boundaries of the other kids in that group, right? Or in my case, it was the 4 of them against me.
Yep.
And it was just like a big WWE meets UFC kind of, all out battle royale, and it was great because, I could toss them around, like little kids, because that's what they were. I could, gently, smash them, play with them, and and do things that you can't do when you're adults necessarily. Like pick them up and pretend to like slam them onto the ground, or things like that. But always in a gentle way, so that I wasn't actually harming any of them, right?
Yeah, like if there's a bed or like a nice cushy couch, one of us is going airborne. It was great.
Yeah, and so I remember Hunter's mother being extraordinarily stressed out when I would do things like that. Like when Hunter was little, I would throw him up in the air like far further than I could reach and catch him, which Hunter thought was great, and his mother thought was just going to give her a heart attack. Stuff like that. And I know that had it been up to her, and not just her, but like a lot of people kind of, they get into this overprotective mode where they think that, this sort of behavior is not good for the boys because it teaches them to be reckless. But in my opinion,
violent.
It actually teaches them the opposite, because, they start to understand what they can do and what's okay and what's not okay. As we're playing, if one of them does something that's unacceptable behavior, that's like being actually abusive, biting, scratching, hitting with an object that isn't, their hands or their feet, something like that, that's where you make corrections and say, no, that's not okay. And you set those sort of boundaries for them so they understand these things. This is important, right? And another part of this is that, like, sometimes while we're playing, even with the best of intentions, one of them will get hurt, right? There have been a couple times where, like, the crack heads together, like, really rather violently, and it's enough that, like, both kids will sit down and start crying. You reassure them and, make sure that they're okay, and they see that they're okay, and then we just get right back to playing again. It doesn't stop. This was a really big thing when Hunter was little. Like if he fell down, because this is typical for kids, right? They're running, and they don't have all of the balance. They don't have control of themselves yet. So they're running a little too fast, and then just like, bam, they'll just wipe out and hit the ground hard, right? And they might scratch themselves up a little bit, but it's not that big a deal. Obviously, it's not life-threatening, And so when Hunter would do that, I would look at him, and he would stand up, and he would either cry or not, depending on how serious it was, right? But in either case, I would like look at him, I'd wait for a second, and then I would like dust my hands together. I'd say, okay, all done. And then just go right back to whatever it was we were doing. And he was great at doing that. He because I set that example and said that, it reassured him that this is not serious, it's not a big deal, and now we're just going to keep going on. And, that's just kind of how we did it.
Yeah, like, okay, that hurt and it sucked, but all right, let's just keep on moving on.
So yeah, I really believe that roughhousing is a really good thing for boys in particular, but girls also. I don't think that girls should be excluded. I don't believe that it's okay for people to say, well, it's okay for the boys to do that, but not for the girls, because they're going to get hurt. Girls, as children, are roughly equivalent to boys. Okay? Meaning that they are just as resilient and just as capable of playing at that level, and it's not going to damage them. I promise you. If anything, it's going to help them the same way that it does the boys. It teaches them that it's okay to play that way, and that if they get a little banged up, it's not a big deal. It's not world ending. Okay, they'll survive and they'll just keep going. All right. And as kids get older, not only is the roughhousing important, I think that it's really important that they get to explore and, pretend. They get to make believe. I know that for me, when I was a little kid, anytime I was outside, if I picked up a stick, it was one of two things. It was a sword or a gun, one or the other. And I went about my way shooting the bad guys or cleaving down the enemy knights, whatever it was. Okay. I think that level of play and that experience of pretend is really important. Again, I think it's very developmental, to set that tone, because ultimately, what we want is for, we want children to grow up with believing that they can be warriors, protectors, providers, that they can be the great knight that saves and protects other people. I think those are all admirable things that they should be striving for. You know what I mean?
What's funny is I think that's almost kind of a natural inclination, because when you said it was either a sword or a gun, you're fucking, cutting away the other knights and this and that. It's like I had that same thing, just kind of like on an, I guess, instinctual level almost.
Right. I remember watching like a documentary or like a wildlife show or something like that. It was talking about lions, and it talked about male lions in particular, and that you can raise them from cubs in captivity, and they will respond and react a certain way, but 70% of their instincts and their actions is purely inbred into them. You cannot change those things. You can keep them kind of constrained for up to a certain point, but at some point, that wild side, or that their actual nature as a lion, especially a male lion, it is what it is. You can't just overcome that with altering their environment. They're not designed to be that way. They're not designed to be house cats. They never will be. They're always on some level going to be a lion. Boys are the same way. On some level, it's an instinctual thing. It's just part of their genetic makeup that they're going to be, warriors. They're going to be guardians. They're going to be, whatever it is. They're out to slay the dragon. It's what they do.
It's kind of the same with wolves. Like, even the ones in captivity, it's like you hit that particular trigger and they're still wolves. Like they will absolutely have that nature about them.
Mm-hmm. So along the way, while all of these things are important, this is pertaining mostly to like kids when they're really little, right? As they're growing up, you definitely want to be able to help instruct them on the way that they think and understand things, right? I think that a really powerful example of that is from the movie Braveheart. When, this is a spoiler alert for people who haven't seen a movie that came out I don't know how many decades ago.
I was going to say, if you haven't seen it by now, then what are you doing?
But William Wallace, he loses his father, right? And his uncle comes to take over and raise him and, go from there, right? And, there's a point in the story where very young William Wallace is picking up his father's sword and he's holding it, and he's got this look of I'm not even sure what to call it. Just profound wonder, looking at the sword and all of the things that it's capable of and all that it represents, right? And his uncle stands there for a minute, really quiet, and and then he says, "First, learn to use this." And he taps the boy on the head. He said, "And then I'll teach you to use this," meaning the sword, right? It's incredibly important that we understand that yes, you can do so much with your life, and you can have so many goals and things that you want to do, but you have got to learn to use your head first. You have got to learn to think rationally as a person. I guess kind of going to what Hunter was saying earlier, you can have a wolf and you can raise it, as a house pet, right? On some level, that wolf is still a wolf, right? You have to, when you're teaching children, you have to teach them to not just instantly revert to the most
basic, like, reptilian brain.
Right. You want them to think first, not react. Mm-hmm. Not to have knee-jerk reactions to things, because that generally leads to a bad outcome, right?
That, and it's like it's all well and good to have the strength and physical capability to do certain things, but if you're a fucking idiot, then it doesn't matter. You actually have to be able to do something with this ability, or do something meaningful.
Yeah, so I mean, it's one thing to be this big, powerful barbarian, which some people grow up to be, right? But if you have, if that's where your mental capacity stops, then all of that strength and all of that power is only good to a certain point.
It's kind of wasted.
If you don't know how to direct it and put it to the best use, then it's really just kind of pointless, right? So, kind of along with that thought, there was something that I thought was really important with Hunter, and it's something that we did all the time. I made it very clear that there was a time when we're playing and we're being serious, because those are two different things, right? If we're playing and we're wrestling and we're doing whatever it is that we're doing, you have to, you enjoy doing that and whatever, but there comes a point where it's like, okay, well, now it's enough, or something's come up, we need to stop. So there has to be a really clear delineation between playtime and serious time, right? And for me, the way that I did that was, I would say, okay, no más. And because that's not part of my normal vernacular, I don't just say that. I don't speak Spanish, right? That was a very clear way to say, okay, we've gone from this point to this point, and we need to switch gears now, right? And Hunter was always really good at just accepting that, because he knew that, okay, that's where we're at now.
Yeah. Just, okay, we're done. And it was never a bad thing, it was just, we're just moving on to the next thing. This is now the time to do whatever it is that we're about to do. Like you said, we're shifting gears.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there's so much that goes into parenting, so I'm sure that we'll have more than one episode that's like this. Another big thing is, and this is right there kind of along with the roughhousing, you have to allow your children to take risks. Meaning that if you see them doing something that for a fact potentially could cause them harm, or they can get hurt, don't rush right out and try to stop them from doing that thing, right? You have to let them take risks. You have to let them have accidents and get hurt, because that helps them understand, again, where their limitations are. If there's a hot stove and your kid reaches up and touches it, and you have the ability to stop them from doing that, you definitely want to do that, because that's going to cause them some serious harm, right? But there's a difference between that and seeing them reaching for something that is probably not going to harm them at a dangerous level, but it's definitely going to teach them some sort of lesson. Then yeah, you kind of have to stand back and let them do that. And so I guess a different example that I would use is when Hunter was really little, he was absolutely fearless. And I mean that in the sense that it didn't matter what it was he was doing or climbing on. If he decided he wanted to come down, he would just jump off of that thing. Right? And more so to me, if I said, okay, here, and I put my arms out, he would jump off of a tree. He would jump off of structures that were 3 times his size. It didn't matter, because he had absolute confidence that I was going to catch him, right?
Yeah, just 100% trust.
So there was that part of it. But he just has never been afraid of climbing up onto really high things, And I watched him one time climb across the top of the monkey bars?
Just some kind of playground structure.
Playground structure, right? And he was only 5, I guess. But he climbed up there and then climbed all the way up on top of it and then ran across the top of it. And there was a part of me that really instinctively wanted to say, hey, stop, or slow down or whatever. But I just let him do it, because I knew that if he fell, he was going to fall on something that was, because it was a playground, so it was that sod sort of material. It obviously wasn't going to feel good if he fell down, but it wasn't going to hurt him.
Yeah, it's not fucking concrete.
You know, he wasn't going to, you know, get a concussion or anything.
Right.
And it was a relatively safe environment for him to be in, you know. So that's another piece of this too. You're not just letting them. It isn't like I'm saying, you know, open the door and tell your kid to go outside and come back in 6 hours.
Watch out for traffic.
You know, or tell him to go play in the street. You know, but like I said, you have to kind of recognize those opportunities when you see them doing something that is potentially dangerous. Don't be so quick to stop them from doing that, because in the long run, that's going to help them. It's going to identify their limitations. It's going to help them understand that, you know, you are not invincible. You know?
I was gonna say, it's like they're either gonna learn that, you know, A, this wasn't a good idea, and you know, I can get hurt doing this, or B, just learn more about their abilities. You know, just kind of the things that they're capable of.
Yeah. So those are kind of the points that I have for right now. Again, I'm sure that we'll have more things like this, because I definitely have a lot of other advice, but I would kind of want to save that for a different time. So at this point, Hunter had kind of come up with some questions about parenting, so we're going to do a little Q&A.
Yeah.
Ask me, and I'm going to come up with the best answers I can.
Questions and talking points. So, as a parent, like, what were some of the most important things that you wanted to make sure that I understood? Like, you know, when it comes to core beliefs, I guess.
So one of the biggest things that I thought was really important is teaching you to be proud and to be not necessarily self-aware, but I remember one time you were just hitting middle school, I guess, and you had left to go to school, and when you walked out the door, you walk right in front of the main window for our apartment, and the way that you were carrying yourself was you had your head down and your shoulders were slumped forward, and you just looked. You know, I'm really big on body language, so those stories really mean something to me, right? Mm-hmm. So you were carrying yourself in a state that, to me at least, said that you were depressed, or that you had low self-esteem, or, you know, that you were worried about something, you know, something like that. And I watched you walk by, and I thought about that for a minute. And then the very next day, when you left, or right before you left, I stopped you, and I said, okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to stand up as tall as you can. I want you to, like, hold your head up, right? Mm-hmm. And I want you to look around like you are the king, mm-hmm. and that you own everything, right? And I want you to, like, when you leave right now, I'm going to watch you. I want you to walk by and hold your head up and stay just like that, okay? And you did. I mean, just without hesitation, you did exactly that, and it never stopped. I never had to say that to you again, you know, for the rest of your life. And to this day, I made a comment about this just the other day while we were walking someplace, that, like, you always walk around with your shoulders back, your head held high, and you look like you own the whole world. You know, that was something that I thought was incredibly important to, you know, that you needed to understand, you know, to stand up and look proud, to not hold yourself in that posture where that said to other people that I'm not enough, or I feel bad about myself, right. You know, so that was a really big deal.
Told me not to stand like a victim. Yeah.
So that was a big one.
I was just thinking about I guess I try to impart a little bit of that on others. That is, like, you know, I was thinking of when I was in basic and AIT or anything like that, where, you know, we're just doing PT and we're running fucking different places. I'd see people running and they're like looking down, or they have their head down or whatever, and I'm like, fucking, eyes up. The future is in front of you, not below you. Just kind of that same thing, that more upright posture rather than being all kind of slumped and downward.
Yeah. So on that same point, I remember that not only would you do that, and I don't think you do this on a regular basis, obviously, but like I remember at one point you were someplace and I was on my way to pick you up, and when you stood, you found like a relatively decent sized rock to go stand on, and you stood and you kind of struck this pose like you were posing for a fucking statue.
Yeah.
And I remember this
like a fucking He-Man or something.
I remember this girl stopped. She was driving. She like stopped and pulled over and got out and took a picture of you, just because you happened to be. You had such a heroic pose going on. I just thought that was really cool.
That's funny.
Yeah, that was when you were a teenager.
Yeah. Next question. So the question itself is, how do you teach discipline? And something that I thought of was, when I was little, we would have our kind of our bedtime routine. We'd brush the teeth and all that. But then there was the push-ups and crunches, like those bedtime exercises. So how, I guess, getting back just to the root question, how do you teach discipline?
So, as far as like teaching discipline, I think that the best way to do that is if I want you to have discipline, I want you to have structure, and things need to be fairly consistent, right? Mm-hmm. I can't do something one way, at certain times, and in a completely different way at other times. So a lot of that consistency has to come from me first. I have to be the one to set the example, and then you have to be able to like follow along with it, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you were fairly young, I started teaching you how to do push-ups, and like real adult push-ups, not like little kid push-ups, right? Mm-hmm. And it was that, and what was it? Squats?
Crunches.
Or crunches. Okay, that's what it was. Yeah, crunches. And it was just like, it was an evening time thing. It was part of getting ready for bed, right? I don't think that was necessarily about discipline so much, as it just, I thought that it was a good thing to do. Mm-hmm. It allowed you to like get some more energy out, and kind of get into the mode, but having the routine, I think, was the most important part of that, right. And like I said, being very consistent, but as far as like discipline, there's a lot of different things that kind of play into that. One of them is sort of having that real, again, that delineation between this is when we're playing and this is when we're serious. Mm-hmm. And not even so much of like, as a little kid, that's easier to do. It's like, okay, we're done now, right? Right. But like, growing up, there are other levels of play that you kind of engage in, and one of those is just shit talking. When we're teasing each other back and forth, or we're whatever. Uh-huh. There comes a point where like, okay, well, now we're done. Now we're getting to a real conversation again. Right. Uh-huh. Or we need to. Okay, we're done, and we're going to move on. Right. So again, I think that's just another piece of that. You have to establish those things, but you have to be very consistent about it. You can't just do it one time and then the rest of the time completely do something else, right? Mm-hmm. So more than anything, I think that as far as the discipline part goes, most of that has to come from me. I have to be able to showing you that this is how we do things, or this is the expectation, and then you just sort of follow along with that as part of that routine or part of daily life,
right? That makes sense.
So another thing, as far as the routine, well, I'll tell you what. You go ahead and ask more questions.
Okay. I'll answer. So the next one is, another teaching question of how do you teach integrity, like, you know, that real right versus wrong. Like I mentioned in a previous episode, like to me on kind of that core level, like lying is wrong. Like there's no two ways about it. It's just fucking wrong. So how, I guess, to give it a different phrase, how do you instill that moral compass?
That is a much harder question to answer. I think that, again, some of that at least has to be...
Kind of like setting the example.
It has to. I have to be setting the example. I can't lie to you and, you know,
And
tell you
me that
things.
lying is wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And then say, well, it's okay for me to do it, but not for you to do it, you know. I think that because I was always very honest with you, and especially, I always talked to you like an adult, you know. I'm not talking like when you were 2 years old, but I mean, once you got to be of an age where you could carry a conversation, I talked to you like an adult. I didn't talk to you like a child. I didn't talk down to you. Right? And if there was ever something that was going on, I always made sure that I explained it the best way that I could to make sure that you understood it, but also so that you knew that what I'm telling you is what it is, right? That I'm never telling you one thing and then going out and doing something else.
Right.
So that right there, I think, is setting that example. And I'm sure that at least somewhere along the way, we had to have had conversations where I explained that this is important. You know, you don't tell people things that aren't true.
Right.
Yeah. So I'd like to say that there were probably other examples, you know, through literature, like books and things that we read together, or like some of the films and things that we watched together, because that was another really big thing, where anytime we watched, you know, Disney films or other TV shows and things like that, again, once you got to an age where you could have this sort of conversations, right? We would sit down and watch it, but then afterwards we would have like a whole conversation about what it is we just watched, you know, why certain things were important. And I would ask you a lot of different questions to help you understand, right?
Yeah.
And so, and this is a really important fact right here, a really key point, right? Whenever I asked you a question, at no point did I ever accept the answer, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay? Because if I ask you a question and you just say, I don't know, essentially what you've done is you've given yourself permission to stop thinking. Right? So to me, that's not an answer, and it never is. It never has been, right? So if I ask you a question, I truly expect you, then and now, to actually think about what it is that you're trying to express and why it is you think that, right?
Yeah, it was, I don't know, and because, like, you know, well, why do you want this, or why are you doing that? Well, because why?
Well, but that is another key point too. So along with me having that expectation of you not to say I don't know, because that's not the right answer,
Right.
because for the parent is never the right answer either. If you're telling your children that they need to do something and they say why, because isn't an answer.
Yeah, because I said so. Anything like any variation thereof. It's
Anytime you're saying something like that, because what you're doing is you're setting an example. You're saying that I have different rules for me than you have for you. You know, and to an extent that is true, right? But it's important that they understand that we are on the same level. You know, I'm treating you with respect, the same amount of respect that I expect you to be giving me in return, right? So, because is absolutely never the right answer. The same way that I don't know is never the right answer. In either case, if I'm asking you the question, it's because I expect you to actually think and be cognitive enough to give me a real, even if it's not, you know, even if it's not wholly correct, it's still how you understand it. You know, that it's what you think of that situation, right?
right.
Because in that, then we can clarify. Then we have opportunity to have conversation and really find out what it is, or help, you know, discover something new together, right? as a parent, I have to give you a reason why I need you to do something. You know, it doesn't have to be the full on.
It doesn't have to be like a speech every time. It's
Right.
just
You
like
know,
a legitimate reason. Like,
yeah. It'd be just because this is what we're doing right now. I need you to do this. And then based on the situation, you explain as much as you can without, turning it into
a whole lecture.
a lecture series. You know?
Like, I need you to take out their garbage because it stinks in here. I don't know. Like,
Yeah. So yeah, things like that.
that makes sense. And then the last thing I have on here, I guess, talk about the importance of positive reinforcement and such phrases as "I love you" and "I'm proud of you." Because I can tell you right now, I heard those phrases a lot more from one parent than I did the other.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that went a long ways towards building the relationship that you and I have versus the other.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were little, and to this day, I tell you that I love you multiple times a day, right? Because I really, really believe that it's important to say that, to have that reinforcement, right? It's sort of like when I held my arms out to you and you would jump off of whatever it was you happened to be standing on at the time, a tree or a ledge or whatever it was,
Yeah.
There was zero thought in your head ever that I wouldn't catch you.
Yeah.
Right? By me telling you constantly that I loved you and not only saying it, but showing that to you all the time, right?
Yeah.
There's never ever been a doubt in your head that I love you, right? A really important thing to understand from a child's perspective is that the way that a child spells love is Time. Okay? You give them your time and your attention. That to a child is everything, right? That means more to them than all of the toys and all of the food, candy, whatever that other things may be. Nothing in the whole wide world means as much as your time and attention, right? And so even if I wasn't saying the words specifically that I love you, I was always constantly showing you, because 100% of my time and effort, or my time and attention, was always on you, right? It's like any free time that I had was always with you, because you were the most important thing in my whole life.
Yeah.
And that remains true to this day. We have other priorities, we have to work, we have other things that we work on, right? But at the end of all things, you will always be the one thing that means more to me than anything else. And I want to make sure that you know that, so I'm constantly telling you.
Yeah.
Your children need to know that you care. You telling them isn't enough. They need to know it. They need to know it and understand it with every fiber of their being. And the way that you do that is you give them your time and your attention. And you make sure that they understand that you love them more than anything. So, yeah. There's a lot of things that will change as your children get older. They're going to learn from, their environment, through all of the myriad of things like social media and whatever else that's coming along, right? But you need to be the thing that they
That foundation.
Yeah, you have to create that foundation. for them to be able to deal with all of the other shit that's coming their way, because there's tons of it, and it only gets worse. The amount of craziness that's in the world now compared to when I was a kid is exponential, and it's ridiculous. So tell your children that you love them. Make sure that they know it 100%. That will make all the difference in the world. So.
I love you.
I love you too. So that's about what we have for right now. Like I said, I actually do have other points that I'd like to talk about, but I definitely do want to save that for a different episode too. So, we at this point appreciate the people that have been listening. Appreciate you sharing this with other people. Definitely looking forward to having this, continue to grow and, potentially help people become better in whatever manner,
Yeah. Just want y'all to think about shit. Want to be better people and then be better people. Not to say that y'all aren't good people right now, but there's always room for improvement, even with us.
So there is this is one of my favorite quotes, and that is from the movie Superman. Superman is my favorite superhero, by the way, which you already know, but there's a point in there where, and again, spoiler alert, this movie came out in the 80s. If you haven't seen it up till
now, what are
you doing? You really should go back and see it. It's the movie with Christopher Reeve, right? And his father is sending him to Earth, right? And he's talking to him and telling him all these things, and he says that one of the important things is that the people of Earth, they can be great people, and that they wish to be. They only lack the light to show them the way. And that is my truest belief about all people. I believe that all people want to be better. I believe that they want that more than anything. But in so many cases, they just don't know how. They need somebody to show them, And I'm not saying that everything that we say is correct, or that we're 100% right about all of our beliefs or the things, our opinions, right? But my ultimate goal is somehow, some way to provide light, or to provide, a little bit of wisdom, so that people can at least try to be better. That's always my goal in all things. I've been a life coach. I've been a personal trainer. I've, been a parent, obviously, and that is the thing that makes me happier than anything else in the whole world is teaching people things, right? And so all along the way while we're doing this podcast, it's always going to be with that same goal in mind, is that we want to teach people to help them be better in some regard.
Because we know that they can be. We just sometimes need a little help and a little guidance to show you the way.
And in some cases, they just need to stop and think about things a little bit differently.
Yeah, just kind of take a step back and reflect.
Yeah. The viewpoint from when you're doing a push-up, the distance between you and the ground is pretty short, and you can see only so much, right? When you're standing on your feet and you're looking around, obviously now you can turn your head and see the horizon and look around, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're standing on top of a skyscraper and you're looking at the sky and the horizon, your vantage point is so much greater. You're able to see so much further, right? That's what it means to stop and look around. Don't just settle for the view that's right in front of you. Be willing or make the effort of trying to expand your horizon and your viewpoint so that you can see and understand more. Because there's so much more out there for us to know and learn, always.
There's a whole world of knowledge and information.
Yeah. So, and, that's all I have for now. How about you?
Yep, pretty good. I guess, stay tuned for the next episode.
All right. And as always, the story of your life is being written right now. And you are the hero.